Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Align. And today we have Yushi Wang, again, a therapist licensed in New York, New Jersey, to discuss a very important topic, especially I would say in the Asian community where it tends to be not talked about, more taboo. And given the spaces that both Yushi and I play, and given our own personal journeys, we felt like it was very important to normalize mental health and positive growth mindsets in Asian cultures. So I think first is want to say welcome back, Yushi.
Thank you so much. It was such a fun time last time. So thank you so much again for inviting me back.
Of
Very
course.
excited.
And a very important topic that we always vibe on anyway. So I think first is, before we get into some of the things that we as Asian Americans may struggle with, let's kind of start like how we got here, right? Like obviously our parents or grandparents who choose to leave a country, they're hoping for a better life outside. So I think I want to remind everyone who's second generation, third generation, whatnot, to remember like the struggles that our grandparents or ancestors went through, which is why a lot of the issues or problems that we go through is kind of a waterfall from what they've experienced. So you should want to first start off and kind of remind everyone, hey, like people our ancestors have left their home country to give us a better life.
Yes, I think that, like I think all immigrants come here for the American dream, right? And then they just feel like there's so many more opportunities in America and we can live a better life. And then also I think that a lot of our parents, like came to this country in the 80s and the 90s, right? To seek a better education, right? Or better work opportunity, right? So when I think that, when we're talking about different generations, right? The first generation immigrants may struggle different things with it, like compared to second generation, third generation, right? So then I think that a lot of times when our parents come to this country, right, they just want to put their head down. I just want to do my job and make a living for my family.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, it's really, really important to kind of like point out that, like back in like 100 years ago, there is this act called, I think it's Chinese
Yeah.
Exclusion Act, right? Like, so like you have to have that as background, right? Like we're not welcomed, right? So a lot of times our parents just like put their head down, like almost like, okay, we're going to forget almost our identity, right? We're going to adjust to the American culture and we just want to be a good citizen so we can be included in this culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say and it'll lead up to a lot of what second generation feel, but there in Asian culture, there's a sense of blending in. Don't
Yeah,
stand out, right? Like
correct.
home, it's like put your head down. And if you think of like for us, like Chinese people, right? I mean, even like now Hong Kong's part of China, in a communist society, put your head down, shut up, and do your job, right? Like that's
Yep,
and there's no sense of safety or security in the sense of like
correct.
everything, it's a communist society, right? Everything's owned by the state. So no matter
Yeah.
how hard you work, at some point, if you wake up and you're too successful, or you're not in it with the politicians and whatnot, right? Everything can be taken away. So I think sometimes,
And,
go ahead,
yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. And then I think that, just to follow up, and also you have to kind of like think about, if your parents are coming from the mainland, there's cultural revolution in the 60s and 70s, right? That is a huge trauma that happened to our parents when they were, like young, right? Like in their teenage years, right? Education was abolished for 10 years, right? Like they didn't get to go to school, right? And what we know about trauma is, like it can pass through generations. So think about if your parents have trauma, right? It can be passed on to your generation, and that's why, and we see a lot of people have like PTSD, anxiety, it's just generational trauma.
Yep, yep. And so with that, once our parents or grandparents come over here, we become second generation, right? They're carrying all of this with them. Again, they've
Yeah.
escaped the home countries to give a better life, not just for themselves, but for future generations, right? So once they come here, right, what are some common themes you see your clients, your network struggle with? And I'll also add some as well. Like common things that second generation Asian Americans struggle with.
I think imposter syndrome is a big one,
Mm,
right? They always feel like that they're not enough. They don't want people to find out who they truly are, right? They feel like, if they know that, who I am, I don't deserve this job. I don't deserve to be in the Ivy League school, right? Anxiety is really big one, depression, um, also trauma, right? And because a lot of times when if our parents are went through trauma, right, and they may traumatize us by verbal abuse, emotional abuse, right, like, or even like not knowing, like physically, using some punishment that that will make a big I guess effect on us mentally.
yeah. Adding, totally agree. Adding to that, I would say oftentimes in Asian community, there's living in fear, right? Again,
Yeah.
there's trauma.
Yep.
So even though the world and their life is much better, no matter how much money they've made, no matter how much success they've gotten, there's still this fear that, the world's not that safe. People may be out to get you. So I remember not just me, but a lot of my clients I've seen theme is, I see a lot of the grandparents or parents say, don't tell everyone your business. Like keep things to
Yes.
yourself,
Yeah.
right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. Not everyone out here is a good heart. Like it's very protective, not opening up your heart chakra. That's something I see as a
Correct.
very common theme. And I think
Yeah.
because of, to your point, like the Exclusion Act, obviously immigrants, not just Asian Americans, all immigrants, right, faced, racism or stereotypes. There's an element of, well, I need to prove myself. I need to work extra hard. I need to be like the top of the class. There's a little bit of like the chip on the shoulder, and also for survival,
Yes.
protection, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm the best, no one can say anything about me. No one can hurt me. So I think I do see that a lot as well in the community where you see the parents expecting like, tiger moms, very true, like A+ grades, doing 1,000 things, having their kids be crazy achieving, not really having that playful childhood that they needed to really figure out what their gifts are. So I see a lot of very successful Asian people in the industries that their parents have told them, this is a safe bet. You're going to make a good living in this sense. And we're kind of starting to see now that a lot more Asians are realizing, actually, I am very creative. Actually, there's other sides of me, and maybe that specific role, like career I have, isn't fully aligned with my true gifts.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that a lot of times, like people have identity issues,
Yeah.
right? We have like growing up, this is the career that you need to, like you need to be in, right? Like this is who you are, right? You have to, again, like um just keep that harmony within your culture, within your family, right? So a lot of times we as Asian American, we don't think twice about actually deep down, what are my values? Let's not talk about your titles, anything, right? Who are you deep down? Right? Like, do you even know who you are? Like, what is your identity? Right? Because there's so many times that we measure our self-worth by the accomplishment that we have, that we had, right? Which school that we went to, how much money that we have. But that is not self-worth,
Yeah.
right? Self-worth is something inside of you,
Yeah.
not by the external
Yeah.
labels, things.
When the way that you put that, it made me think of, say, an Asian male or female just have tons of armor over themselves, over their
Yes.
heart, over their
Yeah.
mind, just armor, 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 armor. And I mean, I'm not surprised sometimes when I see like a lot of the leadership roles, people who are really leading, people who are visionary, still not Asians in America, right? Because I also say,
Oh,
listen, like the stereotyping, the racism, all that aside, how could you lead if you don't even put yourself or see yourself as a leader, right? Like you
correct.
you suppress
Correct.
imposter syndrome. You don't go after it. You don't share your ideas. You're not as creative. Like doing kind of like the grinding out the work, that is not a leader. That's a great executor.
Correct. Yeah, that reminds me of like one of the study that I think that I've heard. So there's this like research lab that they did the study, right? One group, they're literally doing the physical activity.
Mhm.
Second group, they didn't do the physical activity. The third group, they're imagining doing the physical activity, right? Like, for example, playing the piano, right? Actually, the group actually showed improvement is the one that, of course, practicing on the physical
Yeah.
activity, and the group that it's doing the imaginary activity, right? So sometimes, not sometimes, actually, our mind doesn't really know if we're actually in the reality doing it, or we're imagining doing it. So really going back to what you're saying, right? You have to envision yourself being a leader and not a doer.
Yeah, 100%. All starts up here. Any
Yeah,
successful person that they achieve what they achieved, how many times have you heard, I like Beyonce have said, I've envisioned that specific performance to the detail, right?
correct. Yep.
Ariana Grande literally called up when she was like, I don't know, a little kid was like, I want to be on this show. Like,
Yeah.
we have to put ourselves out there. And so I think one other thing I want to highlight is there's a huge identity of the Asian culture of like sacrifice, right? We sacrifice for you.
Yeah.
So you should sacrifice for us. You
Yeah.
should live the life that we want you to live. You should marry a person that speaks our dialect. There's so much sense of sacrifice. I see a lot of second generation people really struggle with like, I want to be, or maybe I figure out kind of who I am, but there's this whole side of me that needs to please the family, give back to them. They've given me so much. Thoughts on that, Yushi?
I think that's, a lot of times if we do something for ourselves, it's viewed as selfish,
Yes.
right? And then that is so problematic, right? Because when you're talking about leadership, right? Like competency and likable,
Yes.
right? If you're just likable, no one's gonna take you serious, right? Because like we want a therapist who's likable, who's
Yeah.
warm, right? But not necessarily we want our leader to be very warm and likable. Like so a lot of times when Asians, when we just want to pour our heart out for everyone else, right? You are really giving up what you want, right? So the true leader is like, you have to think about your purpose, right? You have to know who you are. Like you have to know your authentic self, right? Otherwise, like people will know if you're just faking it or you're just being your authentic self. And when you're being authentic self, people will automatically follow you.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. So I think we've highlighted a good amount of things that, common themes that Asian Americans struggle with. How could we support each other, right? I'm always like solutions. How can we support each other? Awareness is great. I love it. But how can we actually, actions wise, be there for one another?
I think that like in the Asian culture, there's a lot about doing better, right? Like, oh, like go to a better school, get a better job, right? We're everybody talking about self-improvement, right? But also we have to really think about, right? Like there's only so much that you can achieve, right? And we have to talk about self-healing, self-acceptance, right? I think that is really important part in our community that we need to start talking about. Right. And I'm very happy that, like after the pandemic, everybody is talking about mental health. Everybody is like going to therapy, right? And I remember 10 years ago, if go to a network event, right, everybody asks you like, oh, what is your title?
Yeah.
Which company do you work in, right? And now if you go to a party, if you don't have a therapist, you're like, oh, people are like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You
Yeah.
don't have a therapist? Everybody has a therapist. So I'm so happy now, like, and like everybody is, like on their healing journey, right? And then I think that's really, really important. You just like really help each other, right? Like just ask very important questions to your friends, right? Like, and then also, and I think that you have to surround yourself with, people that inspire you,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
couldn't.
And not really question you, like, oh, why are you doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are you not getting the next promotion? Why are you focusing on, self healing? Like,
Yeah.
that's just such a waste of time.
Yeah. I couldn't agree. I think your peer group is so important, and obviously
Yes.
you doing in a work. I would say another area what that would help is I want to be really clear that something that Asian Americans and Asian communities don't do well is sadness or bad feelings are not allowed. That's
Yeah.
like the biggest lie, right? We all know this. If you don't feel, not everyone knows this. If you've ever been to therapy, if you're a coach, you should know this. If you don't feel your feelings, they're going to get stuck in your body.
Yeah.
Not feeling it just suppresses it and it turns into physical illness, right? So if anything, what we've been taught in Asian community is backwards. You need to
Yep.
feel it to heal it and let it go, right? Don't be
Correct.
attached to the emotion. Don't be attached to the event. Feel it, let it go. So I think one thing it would be really healing is also like for the second gens, right? Like you could be the parents or the grandparents that you knew that necessarily had, and you could also be the parents or the grandparents for your own parents and grandparents, right? Something
Yes.
that I
Yes.
encourage
Of
you
course.
to do,
Yes.
right? Some people encourage people
Absolutely.
to do is now that you know better, show your parents a better way. Literally, if you see your mom or dad not having a good day, hey mom, what's up? You
Yeah.
look a little bit down. Hey, like she's gonna be like, she's fine, blah, blah, blah. Keep pressing. Like, I'm here, like, want to talk about it? I'm here. Just creating a space for your parents and your grandparents and
Yeah.
elders talk about their feelings. Because
That's
once
right.
they talk about it, they release it. They'll, oh my God, I feel so much better. Because they never used to do it, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
That,
And I always say that like the emotions is kind of like a cup, right? If you keep filling it with water, what's going to happen? It's going to overflow,
yes.
right? And then, just like you said, it's either going to end up with like a physical symptoms or there's an explosion,
Yep.
right? And then a lot of time your body doesn't know when to explode, when not to,
Yep.
right? And you may, sometime, if we suppress our anxiety, right? And then some student may go to the final exam. Now their mind went blank, right? That's because they have been suppressing all their anxiety.
Yep. 100%. And I feel like for also like for your grandparents or parents, if they beat themselves up, like, oh, that wasn't perfect, or that meal that I cooked wasn't perfect, show them grace, right? Be like, mom, that was good enough for today. Like, you always cook a great meal. Like, we're gonna have ups and downs. Be the parent or the grandparent that you needed
Yep.
for the elders. I think and it's super healing for you because now that you've learned better, you can share better, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's super good point. I think the most important thing I really want to end with is I'm really big about Yushi U as well, self empowerment, right?
Yes. Yep.
As Asian Americans, what are things that we can do for ourselves to empower ourselves? Because ultimately, who's going to save you? It's yourself, right? You can get
Yeah.
guidance. You can get guidance from coaches and therapists who give you space to kind of figure out what it is that you want to get to or achieve. But ultimately, you are your own hero. So, Yushi, what are some things that Asian Americans can do to kind of heal some of the trauma, live in a more abundant and love mindset, and just kind of start showing a better way for the Asian community?
I think that, like what you mentioned before, right? Like we have to change our mindset, right? So there's so many research that shows that self-criticism doesn't work, right? And self-compassion actually can, work long term and get you where you need to be, right? Because I think that we have to acknowledge, right, in our Asian culture, there are a lot of self-criticism
Yeah.
because our parents believe that if I am strict with you, then it's going to motivate you.
Yeah.
But actually, research doesn't show that. 20, 30 years of research does not show that, right? What actually shows that self-compassion, meaning that being non-judgmental towards yourself,
Yeah.
right? Being kind to yourself, right? If something went wrong, really separate yourself and the things that, that went wrong, right? Because a lot of times I think that we internalize a lot of things, right? If something went wrong, it's my fault.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me, right? I'm a defect. I'm not lovable, right? Has nothing to do with you,
Yeah.
right? We have to really, really separate. Whatever other people's opinion has nothing to do with you. I always say that, like, have you seen a very beautiful mountain before, right? Can you see it at night? No, you cannot see it, right?
Yeah.
Can you see it when it's cloudy? No. A lot of times people can't really see who you are.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with your self-worth. So
Yeah.
you have to really believe your self-worth, who you are. And then, again, that's, I think that we have to go on this, self-discovery journey, really own who we are, right? Just really know our strength and then our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then, again, hiring a coach, a therapist, to really speed up that process.
Yeah. And I think of it like as guidance, right? Like you can run these marathons in your head and you're always going back to the same point. When you have a third perspective, someone who's studied this stuff, like
Yeah.
obsessed with mindset, they can help
Yeah.
you pick out the patterns that are maybe not as productive and get you on the right track. But
Yeah.
we're going to say,
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like we all have our own narrative.
yeah, of course.
Depends on who we think we are. We have all these like automatic thoughts, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times negative thoughts, right? So depends on like what you think about yourself, but you have these narratives and interpretations, right? So a lot of times you're just using the same narratives and
Yeah.
same interpretations to kind of like to figure out different events, but maybe your narrative is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And when Yushi says narrative, for anyone who may be like, huh, what is that? I don't understand. Think about it's like every day you wake up, it's Groundhog's Day. You go do
Yeah.
the same thing, your same routine, do the same thing over and over again, but you're expecting, I would like a better love life. I would like a better career. I would like a better relationship with my family. Nothing's
Yeah.
going to change unless you change something about it. And it all starts up here. So, adding to what Yushi said, every single person has a gift. Everyone has something in you that you're inherently born, that you're good at, that you're supposed to share with this world. As an Asian American, it may not all be doctors, lawyers, business people, right? You need to figure out what that thing is, because self worth comes from when you own who you are and you own your gift. And when you own it, you don't care what people say. It doesn't even bother you anymore because you're like, I know who I am. And the people who know who they are end up garnering respect. I'm sure there's people out there who have a completely different mindset from you, completely different way of thinking, but because they show up so sure of themselves, there is an element of respect that you do give them, right? So I think for everyone, a tip is really sit there, journal, work with a therapist, work with a coach to figure out like what your gift is, because that
Correct.
self-worth needs to come from inside. All these accolades, the house, the cars, the money, guess what? It could all go away.
Yeah.
One day you never know. But if you have a worth internally, that's with
Yes.
you forever.
Exactly.
And then rebuild it. You
Yeah.
made the money. It's not like you had money. You are money. You made the money. So you should be more excited about yourself. You're the one that created it, right? You are the abundance, not the things itself. The things itself is just what you manifested or created from here.
Yeah. And I really truly believe if you're passionate about, what you do, you're
Yeah.
going to be good at it. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what you do,
Yeah.
right? It could be a therapist, it could be an artist, it could be a musician, right? Like if you're really good at it and passionate about it, you will be successful,
Yeah.
right? And you can't have a natural artist, right, to do finance.
Yeah. Exactly. It's
They're
gonna
just
be painful.
it's very painful and you're not going to be happy. If you're not happy, your productivity it's going to slow down and you're not going to if you're not happy, you're not going to be so successful.
Exactly. And you're gonna burn your relationships, your friendships, love life down the drain because
Yeah,
you're not authentically showing up as who you are.
correct. Yep. And people knows and people actually know if you lead with authenticity or
Yes.
you're just faking it.
100%. So I think Yushi and I, on my end, I think one last thing I would say is the best way for Asian Americans to heal the trauma and find that self-worth is to find your gift. Figure it out and go all in, as well as unlearning unproductive patterns that you run in your mind and adopting better ones. But Yushi, any last words you want to share in terms of your one takeaway or two takeaways from our chat?
I think that we need to really think about acceptance, right?
Hmm.
Like really, because a lot of times, like if you don't accept certain emotions, if you don't accept who you are, there's always this inner conflict.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna drain you. And then, like you're gonna be so drained and you will not be successful at all. And then I think that we really have to talk about self-acceptance, right? Like, and then, go on this healing journey.
I love it. Thank you so much, Yushi.
Thank you for having
Of
me.
course. See you soon.